Alright, so lately I've been thinking about what it means when some of us say a game would be perfect for Switch, or more recently, perfect for the Steam Deck. It feels like a lot of us agree that certain games just make more sense when you play them on a portable device. So I want to break down what that actually means, but first, to give some context to this video, I want to look back on a portable system that made the industry question the direction that portable gaming was going in. I'm talking about the PSP. Now, when the PSP first came out, it was marketed as a system that let you play big console experiences on the go. And this was a big deal at the time because up to that point, handheld gaming was considered separate from the console experience. Not necessarily because of philosophical reasons, but literally because of hardware limitations. Street Fighter 2, for example, had a Game Boy port that was different from the SNES and arcade versions of the game. They had to simplify the control scheme because the Game Boy only had two face buttons. Fast forward to the PSP, and now you have a portable console that has way more buttons and graphics that got close enough to PS2 visuals. Now, when it comes to the games that were being made for it though, studios took either, I'd say, one of three approaches. Approach number one was to just port already existing home console experiences to the PSP. So games like Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection or Tony Hawk's Underground 2 Remix were examples of this, both games having previous versions that existed on home console already. Now, approach number two was to make games that were specific to the strengths of the PSP. In an interview with OneUp.com, Noriaki Okamura talks about the development of Metal Gear Solid portable ops for the PSP. Mr. Kojima had the idea to base the next game on the idea of recruiting comrades and integrating that with Wi-Fi play. He said that because this game is on the PSP, we should not fit a PS2 style game on the portable system, but rather create a game that is designed specifically for it. So a lot of developers were very deliberate about how they approached the PSP, but then there's the third approach that I'd say a good amount of developers took with it, and it was to just not think that deeply about what the PSP was and to just make whatever felt right. In an interview with Gamasutra.com, Hiroyuki Kotani was asked whether Patapon's graphical style was inspired because it worked so well on the PSP, and Kotani pretty much said, well, it wasn't about how to take advantage of the PSP hardware. However, I wanted to make the users feel closer to the characters. So some developers weren't being that deliberate about it. I say all that to say that ever since the PSP era, there are now several schools of thought when it comes to how a handheld game should be designed, especially when you consider that handhelds now offer home console-like experiences. So what I want to do is talk about the design principles that I personally think make more sense for portable gaming in an era where portable games don't have the same limitations as they did in the past. First principle I want to talk about being visual clarity. Now, portable game consoles have small screens. That's just what comes with the territory. Even though handhelds today can produce sharper images than before, there's always going to be less room for details to be clear and visible because of the literal size of the screen. If there's too much visual noise, things can be harder to see and keep track of. This is especially the case with games that have realistic art styles or more muted color palettes, since characters can end up blending in with the background a little more. To put it more plainly, look at this image of the Digimon virtual pet game. You can pretty much make out that this is Agumon, right? Now replace this image with Bayonetta gameplay on an equivalent screen, and now it gets a bit harder to see what's going on, right? So in this regard, basically, games with simpler graphical presentation, less visual chaos, and more contrasting color grades are a bit more suited for handhelds, in my opinion. One great example of this principle being taken into consideration would be the 3DS version of Super Smash Bros. 4. In the 3DS version of the game, the characters have outlines around them, and this is what Sakurai had to say about why they added that option.
In the Smash Bros. Games, the screen shows the stage from a distance, and the characters appear relatively small. So for the Nintendo 3DS version, we outline the characters so they're easier to see from far away.
So basically, Sakurai understood that a visual indicator that could pop out from the rest of the background would help to compensate for that visual chaos that you usually experience with Smash games, especially when we're talking about the small screen that you got on the 3DS. Now, games that are pick up and play in nature are also perfect for handheld in my opinion. The idea here is that if you're taking your Switch or your Steam Deck outside the house, then you might not have as much time to dedicate to playing the game, right? You may be at a doctor's office waiting for your name to get called, or you might be on an Uber ride or a train ride or whatever. So you wouldn't want a game that requires too much commitment because you might be interrupted by a real life situation. Now, with that said though, I personally don't think there's a hard, strict definition of what qualifies as pick up and play. Like with most design principles, it's a spectrum, but for the most part, the best measuring sticks in my opinion are how quickly a game gets you into the core loop and how quickly you can be rewarded by the core loop. The word rewarded is important here too because this doesn't necessarily mean you have to complete the loop to feel rewarded by it. Now, games can quickly get you through the core gameplay loop by doing a few different things. One way is by not having too many preliminary moments in the game. So long drawn out cutscenes, for example, would make you wait longer before you can even get to the main gameplay, right? And that's not ideal when you're playing games on the go. Games that are based around a singular activity are also able to quickly get you through the loop. So what I mean by that is games like Tetris where you're just matching blocks, or I'd even say games like Ikaruga where you're just shooting bullets from a 2D on rails perspective. Games like this are able to quickly get you into the main loop because their objectives only have one phase. What I mean by this is that you don't have to explore a map to find a quest to do or spend time trying to remember what your objective was the last time you played. The main hook of these games is presented to you the moment the gameplay starts, regardless of your input. And of course, games with short levels also qualify as pick up and play. So Mighty Switch Force, for example, is a game that's only about 3 hours long and the levels can mostly be completed on average in less than 10 minutes. So like if you bring your Switch or your 3DS to work, games like this allow you to squeeze in a lot of progress if you're on something like a 30-minute lunch break. Now, there's one principle that I do think gets overlooked sometimes when we talk about handheld gaming these days. I want to talk about something I'm going to call form factor specific game design. What do I mean by that? Well, earlier we talked about how Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops used the PSP's portability and Wi-Fi features to incentivize y'all to touch grass and recruit characters that you can use in the game. Now, because the PSP is something that you can take with you, this is a feature that is pretty much handheld specific and wouldn't be as feasible to implement on console unless you want to carry the big old BBL PS3 to a Walmart just to recruit some characters. They might escort you out eventually, but anyway, interestingly enough too, Kojima also produced a game earlier in his career called Boktai for the Game Boy Advance. Now, the cartridge for this game literally used solar energy from the sun for the gameplay mechanics.
のゲーム、僕体をゲットしたぞ。太陽の光を感知するセンサーがついてるんだ。太陽の光？これが太陽センサー。ここから光を感じるんだ。
That is form factor specific game design, with the definition of form factor basically being anything that has to do with the shape of a device. A lot of games on DS and 3DS took this form factor specific approach, and one of my favorite examples of this is pretty straightforward actually, and it comes from one of my favorite RPGs of all time, Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey. Now, this game is a first-person dungeon crawler that originally came out on the DS, but I played the enhanced Redux version on 3DS, and the dungeons are mazes that get very elaborate. There's trapdoors, puzzles, optical illusions that make getting around this game a challenge, to say the least. But like a lot of 3DS games, there's a map on the second screen. And yes, every game has a map these days. But Most of the time, it's either a mini map that only shows you abbreviated details about your immediate surroundings, or it's a full map that you have to bring up through a whole separate menu that either obstructs your view or makes you have to just pause the game completely, right? This is not the case in Strange Journey. You have a fully detailed map with icons that show you traps, elevators, dead ends. There's even dungeon sections where you'll literally be stalked by an enemy character named Alex. And if you look on your map, you'll be able to track her location in real time and either choose to avoid her or fight her head on. And none of these map functionalities require you to pull up a menu at any point. You can even drag the touch screen to look at parts of the map that are further away from you. And because the bottom screen of the 3DS is close to the top screen, you can just seamlessly glance at this map without having to completely look away from the main game. So in a game with confusing mazes like this, having this kind of map is literally a game changer because it means you don't have to constantly interrupt your flow or obstruct your view just to find your way around. This is form factor specific game design, and it's only possible because the 3DS is handheld and has 2 screens. So yeah, a lot of these aspects of portable game design can come in a lot of different flavors, but what do y'all think? Is portable game design a thing? Are there any other qualities that make a game perfect for handheld? Let me know. It's GK. Peace out.